Suburban Sentinel here, along with Bella the camera cat. I just wanted to weigh in on the Wounded Warrior Project controversy. For those of you unfamiliar, the Wounded Warrior Project, or WWP, is a charitable organization that helps injured combat veterans. The WWP is a relatively large organization, and the firearms industry and the shooting public are ardent supporters of the WWP. In a recent policy change, the WWP states that it will no longer co-brand with the firearms industry or anyone involved with the shooting sports. I'm not exactly sure how the WWP defines co-branding, but I do know from speaking with representatives of WWP this morning is that donors in the firearms industry or having anything to do with guns will not be permitted to use the WWP logo or name on any charitable event or donation. However, the WWP will still accept donations from the gun industry and shooting sports. Essentially, this means, at least to me, that they'll still take your money, they just don't want it public as to where it came from. When the news of this policy change broke, many of us in the gun community, myself included, were outraged and still are outraged. That said, to the best of my ability, I try to be a level-headed, fair-minded, and non-judgmental person, which always doesn't work, but at least I try. To that end, I tried to see this policy from the WWP's perspective and inquired as to the reason for this policy shift. So I contacted a spokesperson from WWP, and this is their side of the story. Many combat veterans return from duty with a host of mental health issues. Combat action leads to post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, depression, and a variety of other mental ailments. No argument there, that is certainly not a secret. Some of those combat veterans who have psychological disorders as a result of being in combat either attempt to or do in fact commit suicide. No argument there, that problem is well known and has been very well publicized by the military and the media. A significant percentage of the attempted or actual suicides are committed with a firearm. Now, I'm not sure if that is true, but I could believe it would be true. So no argument there either. WWP's position is that because a significant percentage of suicides are either committed or attempted with firearms, the WWP doesn't want to be co-branded with anything to do with the firearms industry. First, in my opinion, that is flawed logic. To me, there's no causal connection between the existence of firearms and the tragedy of suicides. It is true that sometimes firearms play a role in suicides, but there's no causal link between one and the other. Not to make light of the tragedy of suicides, but firearms cause suicides like owning a fork makes you fat. To me, that's just flawed logic. But for the sake of argument, let's assume that the WWP does have some valid basis for this policy. I mean, it is their organization, and within limits, up to them to run it the way they see fit. So let's assume, for argument's sake, that there is some logic as to a causal connection between firearms and suicide. If you buy the argument that firearms lead to suicides in combat veterans suffering from combat-related PTSD or combat fatigue, certainly one would be hard-pressed to argue that combat itself did not play a significant role in the suicide. If there were no combat, there would be no combat-related stress. So my argument is that war has at least as much to do with combat veteran suicides as the existence of firearms, if not more. And I think that would be a pretty tough argument to overcome. Yet, go on to the WWP's website, at least as of today, November 20th, 2012, and look at their list of major partners. The Raytheon Corporation is a major corporate donor. Raytheon is, of course, among other things, a very large defense contractor. Another major partner of WWP is the U.S. Department of Labor, which is, of course, an arm of the United States government. This is the same government that authorized and directed the combat operations, which led directly to the PTSD and other ailments our soldiers are suffering. So WWP has no problem partnering with the quote-unquote sponsor of the war and the company, or one of many companies, that directly benefits from those combat operations. To me, that is hypocrisy of the highest order. If the WWP had a true philosophical abhorrence to guns, weapons, and combat, why would they partner with an arm of the United States government and a big defense contractor? Plus, if this were an entirely philosophical abhorrence of firearms and of those in the gun community, why will they still accept funding from these sources? Our men and women in uniform took a vow to fight for us, our way of life, and our Constitution. Demonizing or marginalizing those of us who exercise our constitutional rights is a slap in the face to the American public and to the men and women in uniform who protect those rights. So based on all of the foregoing, in my book, the WWP no longer stands for Wounded Warrior Project. In my household, it now stands for Went Without Payment. Thanks for watching. This is the Suburban Sentinel and Bella the Camera Cat.